Across their 8-year recording career, the Beatles recorded a grand total of 213 songs. That's a remarkably prolific amount of material, especially for four men in their 20s. The band's original contract with EMI required them to record approximately 2 studio albums a year, plus a single every 3 months. That meant the songwriting machine could never stop, even if the songs that came out weren't always at the very highest quality. John Lennon in particular was known to voice his contempt for the band's catalog over the years. But Lennon certainly wasn't alone. All 4 Beatles, including Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr, had their own opinions about the songs they loved and the ones they wished they could forget. By and large, the Beatles remained proud of most of their output between 1962 and 1970, but there are notable exceptions. Here are 8 songs that the Beatles recorded and hated. Number 8. Maxwell's Silver Hammer.
Bang, bang, Maxwell's silver hammer came down on her head.
If there was one song that perfectly captured the growing tension inside the Beatles during their final days, it was Maxwell's Silver Hammer. On the surface, it's a quirky, almost playful tune driven by Paul McCartney's fascination with old-fashioned music hall traditions. Its bouncy melody and darkly comic lyrics create a strange contrast that in another context might have been appreciated as clever and theatrical. But inside the studio, that charm quickly wore thin. McCartney's perfectionism reached its peak during these sessions. He pushed the band through take after take, obsessing over details that the others increasingly felt didn't justify the effort. For him, the song required precision. For the others, it felt like being trapped in an endless loop. John Lennon later described the experience with clear frustration, emphasizing just how many times they had to repeat the track. Ringo Starr would go on to call it one of the worst recording experiences of his career, while George Harrison criticized the song's overly fruity nature. What makes this moment so significant is that it wasn't just about one song. It symbolized a deeper divide. McCartney was still pushing forward creatively, while the others were losing patience and emotional investment. In hindsight, Maxwell's Silver Hammer feels less like a simple disagreement and more like a warning sign of a band nearing its breaking point. Number 7. Little Child.
Little child, won't you dance with me? I'm so sad.
Unlike the tension-filled story behind Maxwell's Silver Hammer, Little Child represents something quieter but just as revealing: creative detachment. Written during the band's early years, the song emerged in a period defined by speed and efficiency rather than introspection. At that stage, the Beatles were under immense pressure to produce material quickly. Albums needed to be completed on tight schedules, and not every track could be given the same level of care. Paul McCartney later admitted that Little Child was essentially a work job, a song written to fulfill a requirement rather than to express a strong artistic idea. There's also the context of Ringo Starr's role within the band. Songs intended for him were often simplified, both melodically and lyrically. While this approach produced some charming results in other cases, it also meant that certain tracks lacked depth. Little Child falls into that category, a song that did its job but didn't leave a lasting impression on its creators. What makes this particularly interesting is how common this kind of song likely was during that era. Little Child just happens to be one of the few that the band openly acknowledged as such. It serves as a reminder that even at the height of Beatlemania, not every track was born from inspiration. Number 6. Hold Me Tight.
It feels so right now, hold me tight.
For Paul McCartney to dismiss a Beatles song is notable in itself, given how protective he has historically been of the band's catalog. His comments on Hold Me Tight stand out not because of harsh criticism, but because of something arguably more telling: a complete lack of memory. McCartney admitted that he could barely recall the song, grouping it with what he described as work tracks, songs written and recorded without leaving much of an emotional mark. In a career filled with vivid creative memories, that kind of forgettability is striking. John Lennon shared a similarly indifferent view, describing it as a weak song that never really interested him. There's no dramatic story here, no intense disagreement, just a quiet consensus that the track failed to stand out. This kind of response highlights an important aspect of the Beatles' productivity. When you create music at such a rapid pace, some songs inevitably blur together. Hold Me Tight isn't hated in the traditional sense. It's simply overlooked, both by its creators and, to some extent, by history itself. Number 5. It's Only Love.
It's only love, and that is all. Why should I feel?
It's Only Love offers a rare glimpse of unity between John Lennon and Paul McCartney in their criticism. While the two often had differing perspectives on their work, this is one of the few songs they both openly dismissed. Lennon was particularly blunt, focusing on what he saw as weak and uninspired lyrics. For someone who valued honesty and emotional depth in songwriting, the track didn't meet his standards. His criticism suggests a sense of missed potential, as though the song could have been something more meaningful but never quite got there. McCartney approached it with a more pragmatic mindset. He acknowledged that not every song needed to be a masterpiece, and that sometimes the band allowed simpler, less ambitious tracks to fill out an album. His perspective reflects the practical realities of their workload. Together, their comments paint a clear picture. It's Only Love was not a priority. It was functional, serviceable, and ultimately forgettable in their eyes. That shared indifference is what makes it stand out on this list. Number 4. Good Morning, Good Morning.
Nothing to do to save his life.
Despite being part of one of the most celebrated periods in the Beatles' career, Good Morning, Good Morning never resonated with John Lennon. While listeners often appreciate its energy and experimental elements, Lennon dismissed it as disposable. One of the key reasons for this reaction lies in its origin. The song was inspired by a television commercial, something Lennon later seemed almost dismissive of himself. As his artistic standards evolved, that kind of inspiration may have felt trivial compared to the more introspective material he was beginning to explore. There's also a sense that Lennon didn't feel personally connected to the song. Unlike his more confessional work, Good Morning lacked emotional depth in his eyes. It was clever, perhaps even innovative, but not meaningful. And for Lennon, that distinction mattered. His criticism reveals an important truth about the Beatles' later years. Innovation alone wasn't enough. As their artistry matured, emotional authenticity became increasingly important, and songs that didn't meet that standard were often judged harshly. Number 3. Birthday. Birthday is a song born out of spontaneity. Inspired by a 1950s rock and roll film, Paul McCartney set out to capture that raw, celebratory energy. The result is a track that feels immediate and lively, almost like a live performance captured in the studio. McCartney appreciated that energy, but John Lennon was far less impressed. To him, the song lacked depth and intention. He saw it as something quickly assembled rather than carefully crafted, and that perception shaped his opinion of it. This difference highlights one of the central dynamics within the Beatles. McCartney often embraced structure, melody, and entertainment value, while Lennon leaned toward meaning and authenticity. Birthday sits right at the intersection of those philosophies, which may explain why it became a point of disagreement. Interestingly, the very qualities Lennon criticized are part of what makes the song appealing to listeners. Its simplicity and energy give it a timeless quality, even if its creator didn't fully appreciate it. Number 2. Mean Mr. Mustard. Written during the Beatles' stay in India with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, Mean Mr. Mustard originated in a period of intense creativity. The band was producing vast amounts of material, much of which would later be spread across multiple projects. Despite this productive environment, John Lennon never held the song in high regard. He dismissed it as trivial, a piece of writing that didn't carry much weight or significance. What makes this particularly interesting is how effectively the song functions within the larger medley on Abbey Road. It contributes to the flow and cohesion of the album's closing sequence, demonstrating that even material Lennon considered weak could serve a purpose in a broader context. This contrast between individual judgment and collective outcome is a recurring theme in the Beatles' story. A song might not stand strong on its own, But within the right framework, it can still become part of something greater. Number 1. Dig a Pony.
Dig a pony. Well, you can celebrate anything you want.
At the top of the list is Dig a Pony, a song that reflects one of the most complicated periods in John Lennon's life. Recorded during the Let It Be sessions, it emerged at a time when personal struggles and creative uncertainty were beginning to take their toll. The song itself is built on fragmented, almost surreal lyrics. Lines appear to be chosen more for their sound than their meaning, creating a loose, free-form structure. While this approach can be artistically valid, Lennon later viewed it as lacking purpose. He described it as an experiment, taking words and fitting them together to see what worked. In hindsight, that lack of intention became a source of criticism for him. It didn't align with the more direct, emotionally driven songwriting he would later pursue. Yet there's an interesting contradiction here. What Lennon dismissed as meaningless, many listeners interpret as playful and imaginative. The song's abstract nature gives it a unique identity within the Beatles' catalog. In the end, these songs reveal a more human side of the Beatles. Behind the legendary status and timeless music were 4 individuals constantly evaluating their work, sometimes with brutal honesty. Their criticisms don't diminish the songs. Instead, they add another layer to their story, reminding us that even the greatest artists can be their own toughest critics.